Hi everyone, the international break is almost over. We are heading towards game week 30. We are the Premium FPL podcast at premium_FPL on Twitter. Yeah, the break is almost over. We're very much excited, and we've got a special treat for you this week because we're going to talk about, after me, well, without sounding too cocky, hitting the lofty heights of 6K. We know some people on Twitter, some FPL podcasts have kind of been doing a reflection of how the season's gone already with the running coming, because it's kind of relentless now. So we probably won't have the opportunity to do this again. So we're kind of talking about what went well for us, what went bad for us over the season. So we're going to deep dive into that. And then we're going to touch on the fixture rearrangements that might cause havoc going into game week 32, 33, I think it is. So I'm joined as always by the expressive, positive Mindy Priya.
Yeah, I've had you begging me all international break. Please, can I do a podcast on how well I'm doing? So that's what we're. That's your idea. That's what we're doing today. Let Callum have his day in the sun, which is
quite figuratively.
Yeah, exactly. Just to mention, in terms of recording quality today, I think we've both got workmen at our blocks of flats removing cladding. So if you hear any big banging or stuff going on in the background, it's not me breaking down going through my bad season. It's workmen drilling holes and stuff like that. So hopefully it's not too bad. But yeah, we're recording on Wednesday lunchtime.
Yeah, it's been a 2-week break.
Yeah, how was the break for you?
Yeah, I've enjoyed. Just the kind of first week was nice, just having a break, but I'm ready to go again with Premier League because international I have no interest whatsoever. I think I've watched about 20 minutes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to go again with the Premier League and Champions League coming up.
Sweet.
How about you?
Yeah, I only started to think about football again really yesterday. Yeah, it's been good just to not think about it at all, especially those weeks where there was like fixture rearrangements and then waiting on double game week announcements and stuff. It just felt like so much of there's been a lot more stuff you've had to think about and work out this season compared to others. So I think this is the international break I've enjoyed the most since I've started playing fantasy.
Yeah, you're probably not wrong.
Well, before we get into looking at how you got to where you are at 6K in the world and all that, should we quickly just do a brief recap of the free hit week last week?
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah, I think
you did better, didn't you, that week?
Yeah, just about, wasn't it? It feels like an age ago now. 74 points to your 67, so there's not much in it at all. And last pod, we were both umming and ahhing as to whether we were going to play it, and we did in the end. So we both paid off. I think that's probably the first time this season where we've both done something and it's gone well. Normally it's one's done good and one's done bad. So it's good to have some shared positivity. So yeah, I got some 74 points I got. It was good to see the Brighton lads paying off. I know you were talking, if I remember, you were saying it was going to be a ball 1-1 or something. So it's good to see Sanchez, Dunk, Trossard, 14 points, absolutely smashing it. It's good. 2 for Belgium as well last night. So interesting to keep an eye on him going into the end of the season. Lingard, 12, Antonio, 7, Kane, 7, captain, Rafinha, 8. Yeah, just a lovely score around. Probably 2 disappointments were Aubameyang and Watkins. Probably should have played Bamford ahead of Watkins, but we didn't know that Bamford was going to be fit. So, yeah, but Villa without Grealish is like Mindy without Callum on the podcast, isn't
it? I just regret talking you into Lingard when we were in that podcast. In your free hit draft, you didn't have Lingard, did you?
No. Well, you didn't have Brighton players, so we kind of both probably ended up with a similar.
No, I had Brighton players in my free hit draft. I just wasn't sure if I was going to free hit. The story of that week for me was putting my free hit together half an hour before the deadline. I just sort of had a moment of clarity like an hour before and just thought, because I was just going to take a -4. And then I thought I couldn't decide between Lingard and Trossard and stuff. And I just thought, you know what, I might as well just free hit and get all of them in because I can't I can't figure out which one to get. And yeah, Trossard got 14, Lingard got 12. So the only annoying thing was, yeah, I took out Bamford, who I would have had if I'd not free hitted. But overall, it paid off. I think the other main thing that I guess didn't work for me was having Tierney and Cresswell, who I was quite positive on in the podcast before the international break. It was a weird game, that Arsenal West Ham game. I don't think anyone saw a 3-3 come in. So just one of those
3-3 and Aubameyang didn't even score.
One of those random things that happens every now and again in a season where two teams just have a freak game. I don't think there'll be any 3-3s in any of West Ham's remaining games. So
yeah, in your defence, you did call goals in that game, so I'll give it you there. You said that.
Yeah, I was expecting if there was goals, Cresswell or Tierney to be in the assists, and weirdly it was Callum Chambers in the attacking returns for Arsenal. So yeah, it just was a very strange game.
Yeah, I remember Carragher called him Cafu, didn't he? I think he gave him man of the match.
Cafu. So yeah, I think that game falling in a free hit week just was quite annoying. But yeah, thankfully the other games did sort of provide predictable returns. Bale was another annoying one. We think we both had him on the free hit, didn't we?
I think I went against Bale in the end, actually.
Oh, did you? Well, yeah, he ended up going on to
No, I do apologise. I did have Bale, yeah. That's why Watkins came in, yeah, sorry.
So yeah, healthy rank rise for me, though, back up to 62k where I was a few weeks ago. So what about yourself? So how many k did you rise with your free hit?
I think I went from around 17 to 6k. So yeah, did really well. It's good to be in amongst the top 10k now. It'd be interesting to see how far I can go forward. Still got my wildcard left. I think you've got wildcard as well, haven't you? So
yeah. Well,
interesting to see when we activate
speaking of the top 10k, should we get into it then on how you got where you are and what led to me being 60,000 places behind or whatever. Because as Callum sort of said in the intro, a lot of people have been looking at using the time in the international break to look at their decisions and like what their sort of FPL identity is. Are they a risk taker? Are they a conservative manager? I think you would probably say you're a conservative missionary style manager, aren't you?
Yeah, any excuse to get the nickname back in there.
So I guess an interesting way to start this would be now that you are 6k, like what is your aim now for where you want to be at the end of the season? Do you just want to stick in the top 10k, or are you looking to beat your previous top finish, or maybe could sort of go all out and get into the top 1k? Like, what are you thinking?
I think for me, the target's probably to beat last year's finish. So I think it was 4,700 or something. So I think with the wild card still in play, I think that's got to be the aim. Always look up rather than down. People, I know FPL say top 10k is the target, but once you're in there, you've got to aim above where you are. Say if you're 60k, not to rub it in. You've got to be aiming for 10k, 20k. I think wherever you are, if I was 1k in the world, I'd be aiming for top 100. I think that's why we play the game. You don't want to be conservative in that sort of way. I know my play is very conservative, but I think you've got to be aiming upwards rather than down.
Yeah, with what you're saying though, like the fact you've got the wild card left and all that, do you not think just beating? So you need to rise 2,000 places to beat last year's finish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you not think you could actually maybe like be a bit more ambitious even?
What are you thinking? Like top 1k? I don't know what state of chips that many people are going to have in front of me. People might still have the free hit, bench boost and stuff. I do apologise. I've got the bench boost as well, actually, which I'm looking to activate this week. I kind of forgot I had that. So yeah, I'm going to aim above last year's finish, and anything's going to be a bonus because there's still some very good players. I think it'd be naive and cocky for me to say I'm in the top 6k. I'm going to aim for the top 100 now because I just don't think it's going to be achievable unless I played some mad risks and they paid off.
Well, yeah, no, that's essentially what I was like sort of trying to lead the conversation on to. Like, are you gonna keep
More risky?
Because the way I'd look at it is, if I was in your position, you could make up that 2K that you need to rise to beat last year's finish in the wildcard week. Like
Yeah.
if you get in, we're going to talk about the doubles coming up for Spurs and whatever. If you get in those players and other people can't and whatever, and 3 Chelsea and all that stuff, that rise could just happen
in 1 week, yeah,
in 1 or 2 weeks. So I think, depending on if you do want to try and get that top 1K finish on your CV, you could, maybe in the last 2 or 3 weeks, maybe go for a differential captain pick or something. Maybe get out of missionary and do something a bit more
maybe
exciting.
Potentially, like you say, if the last 2 weeks, because I've still got mini leagues to win, bit of cash in there, don't tell official FPL, but I've still got mini leagues to win, so I don't want to go like full freestyle and go completely away from the template and kind of risk that. But if I'm two weeks from the finish and I've got them won and I'm within touching distance from the top 1K, then maybe I might go a bit risky with my captain choices.
Right.
I think that'll be the play. Yeah.
So
I think that's probably what I'll do the last 2 weeks.
So for now, the Kama Sutra book staying on the bookshelf.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually, for that reason, it's making me want to hold the wild card just so I can kind of go a bit ballsy for 2 weeks, but we'll wait and see. I know we talked about 31, didn't we, being the most advantageous, but I think with Spurs doubling in 32 and then blanking in 33, we'll talk about it, and I've got Son and Kane, maybe 30, playing my wild card 31 isn't the cleverest decision, but we'll kind of talk about that, won't we?
Yeah. So back to your sort of rise to 6K so far. What would you say? What would you say were the defining factors or the key game weeks, or just sort of the way you've played, things you've done that have helped you do that?
Yeah, I think from the start of the season, obviously I've talked about it a lot in the podcast, is I use a site called Fantasy Football Fix, and I know many people use that, but I kind of just wanted, my strategy this year from the get-go really early on was, if a player's smashing it and they're going up in value, because there's so many people playing the game at the start, like those price rises, pretty much players go up in 0.2, 0.3 if they've had a really good game week. And I think that was my strategy from the get-go. I wanted to catch on them right away. I had Calvert-Lewin in game week 2, came in, got 17 points, and then continued to smash it. And then I think he went up by about 1 million before game week 6 or 7. It was crazy. And then game week 9 brought in Bruno Fernandes, and he got 11, captained him, and he's been in my team ever since. So players like that, who, like the bandwagon players who everyone's going to get in, that was my strategy to begin with. And not just for like making ground in points, but the value, it's going to be proved critical, I think, towards the end of the season. I think I'm going to be able to build a team on the wild card that not many people have. I think my team's now worth over 107 million. So that was probably the main one. The other one was probably being flexible with approach. I know last week we both played our free hit in the end, and that strategy kind of worked out, but I kind of built towards that game week anyway, so I probably could have had a team out of about 8 or 9 players, but I just thought the free hit would be the best decision. So you kind of get fixated when you're planning ahead that's the only way you're going to go around, and you're not kind of reactive to injuries or players out of favour. So that's probably my 2 pointers this season. What's gone well is bringing in players right at the start who are scoring for fun, and then probably just being flexible, plan multiple scenarios that could happen in your head. Like I'm planning for the bench boost this week. That might not happen. People might come back injured off the international. So they're probably my 2 main things that have done well this season. And that would be my advice next year for anyone playing the game. I just think, especially now in this current age, there's so many people playing fantasy with an increased knowledge in it. So those price changes are quite reflective and of stats, and you're more likely to haul having them players. I don't think it's just a case of people jumping on because they like the look of them, kind of thing.
Yeah. So one of the things we spoke about before we started, like in terms of specific examples, was Calvert-Lewin, which is probably a way to sort of give the people listening like a concrete example, like that. When you talk about bringing players in, scoring and whatever, you were actually like very, very early in on that as well, weren't you? You didn't even wait for a trend to develop. I think I remember you saying, just hearing the way Ancelotti spoke about him sort of convinced you as well on Match Today or something.
Yeah, he said he was like Inzaghi. Yeah, I think it was a lot easier at the start of the season as well, because players don't get injured as much at the start of the season because that fixture build up hasn't happened yet. So I was kind of making changes Saturday after the game had happened, whereas now, fast forward to now, I'm not making a transfer until Friday before the game. I was kind of making changes as soon as match was played, pretty much. Yeah, and then obviously you couldn't afford them players if you waited another few days. So yeah, that was the strategy that paid off for me this season. And it's the old classic saying, isn't it? In any league, you can't win a league or fantasy or any mini league in the first few weeks. It's kind of a season point of view. So you can only lose it. So I think if you just keep that template team right at the start and keep yourself in amongst the top 100K, you're going to be in with a shout towards the end of the season.
Fair play. But before we, so just to break it up a bit, and so we don't have to constantly hear about your successes throughout the season. I'll touch briefly on like what went wrong for me, really, which was mainly to do with my start. So if you cast your minds all the way back to the summer preparing for game week 1, it was trickier than normal, wasn't it? Because City and United didn't have that game in game week 1. And I sort of had a weird strategy that I was like, I don't know, I was like preparing, making sure I had money left in the bank and stuff to bring in United players and City players for game week 2 and 3. And I just sort of got distracted by that element of it and didn't really have the balance of the team that I needed. I actually forgot that I started the season with Che Adams and Danny Ings. I doubled up on Spurs strikers at the start, which was bizarre. I think the thinking was that Crystal Palace had loads of defensive injuries in game week 1, and I thought, well, Ings is the same price as Martial, so similar price to Martial or whatever. I'll move him on game week 2, and it just didn't work. United were then awful. Game week 2 had a slow start after not having a good pre-season and all that stuff. So I think that element of it just didn't work for me. And then the massive thing was not having Salah game week 1, which is that is a gamble that pays off for some managers like later in the season. It's a sort of move that people do to gain massive rank, but it's maybe not something I should be trying game week 1. Like I think the thing I've learned from that is next season I'm just going to start with a safe team. Like make sure I've got the key price points covered. I'm not missing someone that most people have. Because that just meant that then for the next few weeks I was catching my tail. I started off like 40-50 points behind you and most decent managers from the get-go. And then game week 4, I finally got Salah in, but took out James Rodriguez, who got brace. So in rectifying that mistake, I also cost myself. I think there's a little bit of bad luck in that because James is not. My thinking is that James wasn't going to be that attacking in terms of FPL points. Like he was more of a link player and whatnot, which has tended to be what he's been throughout the season. He's been injured most of the time recently, so it was a bit unlucky that he braced in the exact week I took him out. But if I'd had Salah from the start, that wouldn't have happened. So yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is the start, which I know there's probably a lot of people who can relate to that. Getting that team set to have a good start is it's a massive part of it because you're not then chasing people the rest of the season, taking hits to get the players in, and your team is rising in value from the start if you have the right players in. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, like just thought. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Game week 1 team.
Like you say, you can only really lose it in the first few weeks, aren't you? You're not gonna. Like that's the only thing that can happen. You can't win it in the first few weeks, but you can very much before you even get going. You've kind of, if you're down languishing 4 or 5 million, you've kind of to get that turnaround, you're asking for a hell of a lot of luck on your side. It is interesting that, like, going ahead to next year, if we both have a poor start, I'd probably be more open to like wildcard game week 3 or something. Would you say that's something you would have done looking back? Maybe wildcard in as early as game week 2. I don't know when you eventually did play your wildcard.
Yeah, I can't remember that part exactly. I think I would wait at least 4 game weeks. Cause I think, like when you look at stats and stuff, and you can't really see over 2 or 3 weeks like who's having the most shots in the box and who's all those sort of things. You need like a few weeks of data just to be able to make some of those decisions. And teams, like, I don't think managers have really necessarily settled on who's their first 11 3 weeks into the season yet either. So I think I'd wait at least 4 weeks. I think for me though, by not having Salah that game week 1, I was talking about on that podcast, like whether I'd then have the balls to bring in De Bruyne for a hit for game week 2. And the fact that I got the Salah decision so wrong meant that I didn't. And De Bruyne got 13 points against Wolves game week 2. That was City's first game of the season. So that, just like having that bad start game week 1 meant that I didn't then like have the confidence to follow through on what I was actually planning. So yeah, that's the other thing. Like, if you have a plan, you kind of have to. You can't let one bad week just sort of throw you off your whole plan, because it's like, I've seen Mark on Black Box, which is a popular FPL podcast this season. He was talking about, when you've had a few red arrows in a row, it's a lot harder to back yourself. Whereas when you've had a few green arrows, like, you're happy to take that risk or whatever. And sticking to the plan so much easier when you're confident in how things are going. So that's something else probably for next season. Try not to let one bad week just sort of throw you off from what your plans are.
Yeah. One thing that doing this podcast has helped me this year, I think, especially now, there's so much information on Twitter, you can kind of overconsume, and that's probably the reason why everyone ends up with a similar team. You kind of brainwash, really. Would you say? I'd probably say it's had more of a positive effect on my team this year, just because I've not really let that brainwashing of teams impact me as such. But the statistics around another player that got in quite early on was Luke Shaw, and his key chances created, his like XGA was like unbelievable through the roof, and I kind of took a punt on him, and that is a transfer that paid off. So I think this year I've definitely allowed stats to enter my thinking of FPL, whereas in the past I was probably a bit more casual with the stats, whereas this year I've kind of really stepped it up, and next year is something that I'm definitely gonna like look into, like kind of get on players really ahead of the curve. And those are the decisions that you kind of make 10, 15 game weeks in, when you've got a bit more like stats at your hand, people have built up, because you can't really make an assumption after 1 or 2 weeks. But that's something that I'm going to look into going forward into next season.
Well, yeah, hopefully you start bringing some of these stats that you're researching and offer them up to listeners on the podcast as well. What was I going to say?
We'll have to set up a Patreon first. What is it? Patreon.
You have to figure out what it's called before you start asking people for money.
Patreon. Asking people for shots.
Yeah, clubs aren't open for a bit yet. You're gonna have to wait for your shots. Where was I gonna go from there? So yeah, but before we get into what we're actually doing for this week and wildcard and stuff, is there anything else you wanted to say about transfers that sort of defined your season, or things that helped?
I was just looking through my game weeks again whilst you were talking as well, and just go again off that building a team early off the team value. Game week 5, playing wildcard, brought in Kane and Son, and they both got Kane got 16 points, captain 32, Son 13. So yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to do next season, is build up that team value early and jump on the players that people are getting in.
Fair. Well, I think the other main downfall for me this season was, once I got my season on track and was getting a few greens in a row, I then had a week where I took out one of the players that had been consistently performing for me in Thomas Souček, and I took him out for a -4 as well. And he got a brace that week. So yeah, I think what I've learned from that is that I took that hit, I think, to get Son. I think I got Son and Foden in, which, it sounded fine on paper, but then I wasn't necessarily thinking about, I think, who did West Ham have that week? Was it Palace? Yeah. So I think something I've done the past few years is like when you're making your transfers, you spend a lot of time thinking about what the players you potentially bringing in can do for you, but you don't spend as much time thinking the player I'm taking out, how much could they hurt me? If that makes sense. Like you look at the fixtures for the player you're bringing in, and you look at like have they been attacking, like what position are they and stuff, and you sort of don't spend as much time thinking about the player you want to get rid of. You've already decided like you're not really happy with that player, or because you want someone, you're just trying to find someone to make way. And I think I need to spend a bit more time, like especially if you're taking a -4, like how likely is that to hurt me? Because I think I've had spent more time thinking about that in that week. What week was it? Game week 20. I probably wouldn't have taken a hit to get rid of Souček if I'd thought about that a bit more carefully. Because yeah, he was popping up in the box so often, getting his head on things, and which wasn't a good idea to take a -4 there. And then yeah, I think I had like a 40k, 50k drop that week off the back of that. So that was another big pitfall in my season, which yeah, something I've made a mental note of for next year. Be a bit more careful with that sort of thing. Don't just think about the player you're bringing in. Check whether the player you're taking out is actually the right player to be taking out, or should you be doing something else? With our season introspective sort of thing done, shall we get up to date, talk about what's actually happening this week and next week?
Yeah, should we go on to what we're going to do this week first before we go on to fixture rearrangements, or do you want to do that first?
I can talk about the fixture rearrangements and stuff first.
Okay, cool. So if you've not seen the latest, I mean, I know we've had a few weeks without game week rearrangements, but we're soon back on it now, just to make things more confusing. So I don't know if you've seen the 32 games disappeared for a while because of the FA Cup. Like the teams who were in the FA Cup, those games just disappeared, but they've just been put back in the same game week. So 32 is pretty much everyone's playing once, other than Tottenham are playing Everton and Southampton. They have a double now, and Crystal Palace don't play. And then in 33, Tottenham, Southampton, City, and Fulham have a blank. So that's going to make it tricky with what to do with Spurs, really, because I think every man and his dog's going to have Kane and Son 32, but are you going to have an exit strategy and get them out in 33 will be the question there. And then City as well. Fulham and Southampton, not many people have players from them, but City and Tottenham are probably the ones there. And then I think because of the rearrangement of the last two games, 37, obviously, I think they want everyone to be at home once whilst fans are allowed. So I think the FA Cup falls in 36, the FA Cup final. So that'll be interesting. I think the game is going to be pushed back to 35. So there's still going to be, after this, there's still going to be a few more blanks and doubles. So it's worth keeping an eye on. It won't be too many, but it'll be big hitters like Cities and Spurs, which Spurs are very popular for the two main fantasy assets this year. So it's going to affect everyone in some way.
Yeah, I think touching on, to sort of bring in what you were saying about what's helped your season, I think this is where being flexible comes in, because a lot of managers who've still got the wild card have been set on wild carding in game week 31 to get on the fixture swings and get on the Chelsea boys, get rid of the Leeds players, that sort of thing. But if you want to have 3 Tottenham players for their double in game week 32, maybe then it might be best to you might want to wildcard them out in game week 33, or maybe you want to wildcard in game week 32 to bring in the 3 Spurs players in one swoop there. So yeah, don't just sort of stick with your plan that you had before the international break. Now that there's new information, that's sort of maybe the flexible thinking you were on about before.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was very much set on wildcard in 31. I still might, but I think originally my wildcard team didn't have Son in, and I think that'd be a stupid decision, especially that doubling 32. I think if you've not got Kane and Son, you could have potential to have a big falling rank, just because if they haul in both games, Everton and Southampton, which on the face of it they could do, I think you'll lose quite a bit of ground there. But yeah, it kind of makes wildcard in 33 maybe a bit more attractive, because you can kind of leave Kane and a City player on your bench and trying to get through it that way with two of them, because you kind of want to, because then immediately after Tottenham play Sheffield United and City play Crystal Palace, so it's going to be a tough period to manage. Have you thought about when you're going to play your wild card?
Well, yeah, my plan was 31, but I've not really. Now that there is this new information, I'm going to have to think about it a bit more. And in terms of flexible thinking, my plan for this week was to take a 1 week punt for my wild card in 31. But now that I might not end up wildcarding in 31, the player I bring in this week, just in case it's not a 1 week punt, I need to make sure it's not just a player that's got one good fixture or a player that might just play this week, because I think to sort of explain my thinking, like I was looking at Alonso, but Alonso now, in case say if I need to hold him for 2 or 3 weeks, he's not ideal with him rotating with Chilwell. So if I'm not wildcarding in 31, I might not be the smartest decision to bring in Alonso. So I'll have to think about that. But yeah, not really sure. I think in my position, I'm trying to gain 40,000 places. What wildcarding the sooner the better is probably what I should do, because it gives me more weeks of the season for the players and the differentials I bring in to work. So probably 60-40 in favour of still wildcarding in 31.
Yeah, I'm probably the same as you. Yeah, I'm still edging towards that 31, but it's made it a bit more tricky. If I am to wildcard in 31 now, I probably would have Kane and Son. Would you say the same? Whereas before, I'd probably just have Kane. Yeah, that's probably the main difference.
And then I guess for people who are set on wildcard in 31 still, could maybe touch on best transfers to make this week as a 1 week punt sort of thing, because there's a few sort of eye-watering fixtures, aren't there, this week? There's Chelsea versus West Brom, which looks a great one for Chelsea. Although they're not scoring many, it looks like a guaranteed clean sheet at least. And then you've got, what's the other one? Spurs Newcastle. I think most people have the Kane as captain in that game.
And then the other one's probably Leeds.
Yeah. So
Alfred Rafinha.
Just to touch on that game. So Sheffield are, in terms of data, they're the worst defence in the league over the past 4. I think I saw that they conceded 19 chances, 19 big chances in the last 4. So yeah, they rank the worst for conceding big chances of last. I think the motivation to sort of keep things tight and all that has sort of gone a little bit with Wilder going. So Rafinha or Bamford could actually be a good differential captain shout this week, because if you do go off that kind of data, Newcastle actually aren't that bad. I think they rank 7th for conceding chances, which is quite a way down the table compared to Sheffield. So if you are a risk taker, if you are if you have got the Kama Sutra book out, unlike Callum, it could be an interesting play. That I think the only thing that's annoying about it is that Leeds tend to do, actually, like throughout the season, they've tended to do better away from home, and that pit, they've still got that.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that. Yeah,
the joke of the pitch. Yeah,
they've had it relayed, but it's gone even worse. It's like a car. Like everyone's just slipping. Guess
who they paid for that pitch?
Spurs, yeah.
Daniel Levy. Like he just I don't know how he does it. He sold them some rotting carpet and like just got away with it. But yeah,
it wasn't cheap either. I'm sure it was millions, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what went on there. So, have you got any thoughts on that? Is the captain firmly locked on Kane for you this week, or?
Yeah, like that pitch just puts me off. I don't think Leeds have steamrolled someone at home for some time, have they? So that probably puts me off. Bruno, with Brighton's form, kind of puts me off. Yeah, I think Kane's still the standout for me, but I kind of get where you're going with Sheffield United falling off a cliff. I just because I missed the missionary, I bet the estimated ownership when you factor in captains, Kane's probably well over 100%. So kind of want to protect myself there because you can kind of see him scoring a hat trick, can't you?
Oh, that reminds me. You were talking about like what being on Twitter more and having the podcast and all that stuff has meant that's different for us. For me, what's the phrase? Expected ownership.
Here, is he going to sound like a rapper granddad? Like, what's this? It's to be ownership. Look it.
Yeah,
load of bollocks.
But this EO wank. I didn't used to, I didn't when I was picking my captains in previous seasons. Like, I'd have an awareness of who the proper captain was, but I'd never see the expected ownership, like this idea of like Kane being 170% or whatever. Like, so there've been weeks where that does sway me more, having seen that stuff more. So yeah, that's something else which is going to sort of reevaluate over the break in when the season ends. Like, is that actually worthwhile? Because managers who ignore that sort of stuff, like I think Az on Black Box was talking about it on their stream, like not caring about expected ownership meant that he went for Trossard, which was a bit of a gain in points. And really, Kane was lucky to get that penalty in that game. He could have Trossard and Lingard could have easily outscored Kane quite a bit in that free hit week. So I think expected ownership, it has its place, but just blindly picking your captain every week based on who's the most captained, it's not really that smart, I don't think.
All right, that's that then. EO, fuck off.
Well, don't fuck, but just don't, like, say for example, there was a player who was the most captained by like 30 or 40% on EO, but you didn't fancy them at all. Would you still go for it?
Well, that's like a very big hypothetical question because the EO, it's always players who you fancy. When is it not someone who's right at the top of the thinking?
Well, let's say, for example, it could, if Salah had a good game this week, it could easily be Salah or something, and you might you might be convinced that Jota's the better option at Liverpool now. Salah's not been putting away his chances. It's like there will be times in a season where the top EO pick might not be in line with what your top pick is. So would you?
Yeah, it might not be top, but it'll always be there or thereabouts. I don't think it'll be ever. There'll never be a top EO captain that I'm like, where's he come from? No, I never thought about him. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, fair enough.
Normally that's just used as something that might sway me if I've got a few in my mind. Because it's rarely very straightforward that a captaincy is like completely straightforward. So that's it's not something that I'll be like, whoa, who's the EO captain this week? Let's follow him. It's more like if it's 3 or 4, like let's have some awareness of who's captaining who, and because the captain is never something that I enjoy doing. Like it's something that can completely kill you. So I'd rather just put the burden on with everyone else and just be like, well, we ride or die together.
Well, yeah. But before we get into EO beef, we'll be here all night with that. I reckon all night, all day. Shall we get into the questions before we have to wrap up?
Yeah, just to touch on my transfers this week because I think you talked about yours. I'm very much looking to play my bench boost this week. Take out Fabry for Mindy, Chelsea goalkeeper, and Cancelo for Rudiger, and then play my bench boost. So on my bench, I'd have Mendy, Rafinha, Bamford, Rudiger. I think it's a no-brainer. So Yeah, that's good. That's hopefully going to be my decisions. I've got just enough money to do it with Mendy and Rudy going up the other days. And I didn't want to do him just yet because Son might still not be fit. So if Son's still fit, if Son's fit, then I'm going to activate bench boost and bring them two in, I think.
Right. Yeah, that does look a solid bench to have. Probably another decent score coming for you this week. If
Hopefully. I just think when a wild card, I don't want to have a ridiculous bench. And
yeah,
yeah.
That's another one to sort of look at in the when we've got the break after the season ends. How best to use bench boost because so many people messed it up, including me. So first question from Varun is Varun, whatever. Will Aguero get more minutes in the run-in for Man City for his Man City Swansea?
He's not someone I'd be bringing in yet, but we talked before. You've still got your wild card, or you want to make a ballsy transfer last two. If City have got the league wrapped up and we're still going for the FA Cup and Champions League, I can very much see Aguero being given the last home game at least, maybe the last 2 or 3 Premier League games. So yeah, potentially one last sing song for Aguero.
One last sing song. That's not a phrase, is it? What was I going to say?
My brother's convinced he's going to go United, so we'll see if it's his last PL swing song.
You just called it swing song. If you called it swing song,
song.
Jesus Christ!
Let's wrap up quick.
One thing I wanted to ask you, so City have decided not to renew his contract, haven't they? Rather than him. Yeah. So
he was offered a pay-as-you-play deal, which he was like probably like no chance. Where if City sign a big striker this summer and you've still got Jesus around, Jesus is still young. He gets a lot of flack, but he's still very much in amongst it. In 5-6 years, Jesus will be right up there with top strikers in the world. Firmly believe that. So yeah, it was probably the right time. As sad as it is.
But yeah, so the fact that City have made that decision, it kind of suggests that Pep or whoever, they're not completely sold on him to make that decision. So that does go against sort of getting him in now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I won't get him in now, but I think if we have the league wrapped up, he'll definitely be given the last home game, surely.
Yeah, no.
He'll be captain as well. He'll be captain. Got to be.
You'd imagine he'd get given penalties and whatever as well for that week.
The players will be teeing him up for fun. So yeah, very much wait and see. But last week, I think there'll be a real bandwagon around him.
And then the other question we had this week was from Zach, which was about the doubles, which we touched on, and when to use the wild card, which we also touched on. I guess we can just say that we'll be going more into that on next week's podcast, won't we? Because we spent so much time. We spent a lot of time this week talking about earlier parts of the season. So yeah, we'll go into more on that next week. Because I don't think there's many people wildcarding this particular week. So yeah, we'll do more on that next week. So tune in next week.
Yeah, and I think the last one was off. Josh, you just put one on just before we started.
Oh yeah, okay.
Thoughts on Liverpool defence and wildcard, and I think Trent's numbers have gone up a lot recently, so he's very much someone who I'm looking to bring in the wild card, depending on when I play it. I'll probably see Liverpool's next couple of games and make that decision.
Yeah, forgettable personality, Josh. Missed his question. Bit of an afterthought. Trent is also motivated to get in the England squad, you'd think. So
yeah, he's probably the one if I was getting a Liverpool defender.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, if you look at if you're not sure, like the motivation factor, like it's worked for Lingard, hasn't it? Recently, wanting to prove himself and get himself back in the England thinking. So
and you'll think he'll play every game just because Klopp will want him to get in that England squad, won't he? You'll think they'll have that relationship there.
But that's everything for this week, and the workmen are right outside my window. So let's wrap up here. Let's hope you've all had a good international break, and hope you're ready to get back into it. And let's pray that Callum fucks up his bench boost.
Nice one. Good to know you have my my best interests at heart.
Always. But yeah, see you next week.
Yeah, that.